Look at the red in your food, the strawberry yogurt, the candy, the fruit juice, even the lipstick on your lips right now. There is a very good chance that vivid red was made from crushed insects, millions of tiny bugs ground into a paste. And this is not some ancient mistake. It is happening today, in products sitting on your shelf. For centuries, this little bug was worth more than gold, guarded by an empire and hunted by spies. This is the story of the most valuable insect in history, and why you have been eating it your whole life without ever knowing. This creature is Dactylopius coccus, a tiny scale insect that spends its entire life anchored to the fleshy pads of the prickly pear cactus. They appear as a dusty, white mold on the plant, but beneath that protective waxy coating lies a soft, plump parasite. Only the females contain the prize, a highly concentrated chemical defense mechanism called carminic acid. This bitter compound deters predators in the wild, but when harvested, it produces a vivid, brilliant crimson that resists light and heat better than almost any vegetable alternative. The extraction process is remarkably simple. Harvesters brush the stationary insects from the cactus pads, dry their bodies in the sun, and grind them into a fine, blood-red powder. The scale of this harvest reveals why a microscopic organism became one of the most coveted substances on Earth. To produce just 1 single pound of pure carmine dye, workers must collect, dry, and crush roughly 70,000 individual female insects. This painstaking agricultural science was perfected long before European ships reached the Americas. Indigenous farmers in the valleys of Oaxaca, Puebla, and Tlaxcala mastered the delicate art of hand-rearing these insects, using brushes made from deer tails to transfer them to fresh cactus pads. To these cultivators, the white fuzz on the cactus was a prized crop. The insects yielded a permanent, brilliant crimson that bonded indelibly with cotton, rabbit hair, and ceremonial featherwork. This bug was treated as treasure. In the Aztec tribute system, the province of Tuxtepec and surrounding regions paid their rulers in bags of this dried red grain, known in Nahuatl as nocheztli. The Codex Mendoza, a post-conquest tribute record, preserves these transactions in glyphs showing bags of the precious commodity. Long before foreign empires fought over the secret of this color, Mesoamerican societies had already built an entire economy around its brilliance. When Spanish conquistadors seized the Aztec capital, they expected gold. Instead, they found warehouses filled with bags of dried gray bugs. They quickly realized these shriveled bodies held a different kind of fortune. By the late 16th century, cochineal became the Spanish Empire's most valuable export from the New World, surpassed only by silver. Galleons departed from Veracruz packed with tons of the dried insects, destined for the Casa de la Contratación in Seville. The Spanish crown seized control of the trade, imposing strict royal monopolies and heavy customs taxes known as almojarifazgo. This insect was no longer just a regional dye, it was global currency. Every year, hundreds of thousands of pesos worth of crushed bugs crossed the Atlantic, transforming a tiny parasite into the economic engine of an empire. And for 250 years, no one in Europe knew what it actually was. While European naturalists argued over whether the import was a seed or a worm, the continent's ruling institutions used its brilliant crimson to assert absolute authority. This was not a color for the masses. It was the visual language of power. The Roman Catholic Church dyed the robes of its cardinals in this insect-derived scarlet, rendering spiritual supremacy in a rich, bleeding red. European monarchs draped themselves in cochineal dyed velvet to project divine right, while royal warrants mandated strict pigment purity for court garments. By the 1740s, the British Army standardized the dye for its officers, turning the battlefields of the empire into seas of bright redcoats. Church, monarchy, and military, all wrapped in the blood of a tiny Mexican parasite. How could a global empire run on an ingredient no one understood? For over 2 centuries, the source of this brilliant red remained a closely guarded secret. Spain controlled the ports, leaving European buyers to wonder what they were actually buying. Was it a seed, a berry, a dried fruit? In 1535, the naturalist Gonzalo Fernández de Oviedo described cochineal as a simple red grain. 30 years later, the physician Nicolas Monardes claimed it was a seed that resembled a small dragon. Spain actively fed this ignorance to protect its monopoly. If rivals believed the dye grew on a plant, they would never search for a living parasite. This confusion lasted for nearly 250 years. It only ended when natural philosophers turned a new tool toward the grains, the microscope. Antony van Leeuwenhoek analyzed the dried particles and dissolved the plant theory. Under the lens, the shriveled grains revealed the unmistakable anatomy of desiccated female insects. Europe finally realized their prize scarlet was made of crushed bugs. Now, they wanted to steal them. In 1776, French botanist Nicolas Joseph Thierry de Menonville slipped into Mexico under an assumed identity. Disguised as a Catalan merchant, he traveled the heavily guarded roads leading to Oaxaca, the restricted heart of the Spanish monopoly. Spanish colonial law treated cochineal smuggling as a capital crime, punishable by imprisonment or death. Yet France was desperate to break Spain's economic stranglehold. Menonville spent weeks quietly collecting his biological cargo, live cochineal insects and the prickly pear cactus pads they depended on to survive. To get them past the port authorities, he hid the infested plants in hollowed-out containers, keeping the tiny parasites alive through a grueling sea voyage to the French colony of Saint-Domingue. Once there, he established a secret plantation, proving that Spain's tightly guarded secret could thrive outside Mexico. This successful theft of living organisms shattered the absolute monopoly Spain had defended for over 2 centuries, turning the trade of a red dye into a high-stakes game of biological espionage. In 1856, the high-stakes game of biological espionage met an enemy it could not steal, the industrial laboratory. William Perkins synthesized the first aniline dye from coal tar, unlocking a world of cheap, artificial color. By 1859, French chemist François-Emmanuel Vergin patented fuchsine, a brilliant, synthetic red soon known as magenta. A decade later, German chemists synthesized alizarin, offering a cheap, stable alternative to natural red. Factories quickly did what empires never could, rendering the grueling harvest of millions of tiny insects economically obsolete. In Oaxaca, annual exports plummeted from 3 million pounds in the 1850s to just 100,000 by the 1890s. The priceless parasite became worthless. Public anxiety over synthetic chemical dyes eventually forced a retreat back to nature. Food and cosmetic manufacturers quietly returned to the insect they had abandoned, reviving a global demand for natural red. Today, this parasite hides in plain sight on supermarket shelves. It appears on ingredient lists under the names carmine, cochineal extract, or E120. It colors strawberry yogurt, red candy, fruit juice, and lipstick. While labeling laws in the United States and Europe make these names searchable, they also expose a modern conflict. For vegetarians, the ingredient means unwittingly consuming animal products. Stricter kosher and halal authorities advise avoidance, while medical records link the dye to cases of severe allergic reactions and anaphylaxis. The ancient crimson remains a silent staple of the modern diet, waiting on the shelf for anyone who knows where to look. Today, the ancient world's most guarded secret sits quietly on our supermarket shelves, disguised as a simple ingredient. We conquered empires to control this color, and we still choose to eat it every day. Would you give up this brilliant red? Share your thoughts below.